Hey, good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning.
I want to carry on a kind of a series. Sorry to just jump right in. Weather's good in California. It's a
Yeah,
little
everything's
chilly
good.
here in Colorado,
Let's
but
hit it.
everything's good. All right. Family good.
Yeah, great.
Students are great.
Yeah,
Okay. All
you.
right.
I've got you hit me at a good time.
Okay.
I got
Well,
no problems.
I feel like the world's still adrift, and so I'm going to try to get some. I'm going to try to mine you for some more advice for American citizenship, and try to theme or weave together a couple shows, and including last week, a kind of a continuation of last week. I think I titled this, and you may not even seen the title. You have no idea what we're talking about, probably. I think I titled this "Okay, so we know a little bit of history," and that would apply to me. I read a couple books now. I like know nothing, but a couple little areas it's actually impacted my life because I've read some really good books that you've recommended. But most people aren't reading these books that you recommend because I've encouraged them. You've encouraged them. It's been 3 or 4 years now that I've been encouraging them, and I know they haven't read them. Most, unless it's assigned in class, and then they may not read it then either. But do people read these good books?
Uh, People do. It's funny. My good friend Tom Bersino, who teaches at the Army War College, we
Yeah, bring
always
up
point
Tom.
out when we say, we get depressed about um, the state of society or the state of education. There never seems to be an end to the hunger when it comes to good history books, and people do read them. So it's maybe not enough, and maybe it's not widespread enough, but there's always a critical mass
All right,
of
let me ask you this then.
civic-minded Americans.
I'm that pleases me. So great. And I think it's called a Venn diagram. I'm pretty sure it's called a Venn
Yeah,
diagram, but overlapping circles.
overlap. Yeah.
All these people that buy these good history books and read them, none of them are on X or Facebook. It's a separate Venn diagram. Is that correct?
Well, they are, but they're not sharing the same Facebook or X/Twitter experience that became so toxic over the past few years.
Yeah, so they don't weigh in when somebody's being really snarky and like gotcha politics or attaboy, whatever, and just the weird stuff you see on social media. They're not weighing in. They're going, well, excellent point, but I'd like to refer you to a book written by. They don't. They just skip those arguments, right?
And for the most part, they don't even see it.
Yeah.
I try to remind people that how different my social media feed is than what many other people see, which is, when everybody was getting all good and hated up a few years ago, I found that by muting about 3 people, that's all it took,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
and then Facebook changed their algorithm to and then I've always been a little pretty careful on Twitter to only and this should, I it's good advice, I guess, for everything, but follow good people, and or I shouldn't say follow. I hate referring to followers, but
Right.
you know
Right. Right.
keep keep up with good people. Surround
Yeah.
yourself with good people, and your social media experience can be positive.
Yeah, so I also give that similar advice to people. And then there's millions of us, and I have my own reasons for wanting to know what people are talking around the water cooler. But millions of us ignore that advice. Why? Because we kind of get a thrill out of it, or we like to see who's beating up on who, or what some crazy person is saying. It's just kind of a fun. It's kind of like doing Sudoku puzzles or something. We watch crazy people on Facebook and Twitter, right?
Well, the other thing I stopped doing was publicly commenting on things. I always send a private message. I learned that a
Yeah,
long time ago too, which is that people don't like being publicly humiliated,
right.
and they will never admit that they're wrong in public. But if you can send them a private message, sometimes you can, um, you know, maybe influence them a little bit.
Those are great. I get private messages every single day. I don't know if there's been a day in the last 15 years where somebody hasn't sent me a private message going,
Yeah,
"Hey, John, I just want to give you my thoughts on." And
right.
sometimes it's from a couple days or a week or two ago, and I go, "Thoughts on what?"
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah.
great. But
And so okay, so you think more people know a little bit about history than I'm leading off with? They just don't speak about it in the same water cooler circles.
I don't know. You know what it is it's interested, a lot of interested professionals do. You know, if
Yeah,
you go to
agreed.
a Rotary meeting and you start asking people about history, you just say what you'll find is every Rotarian will throw up their hand. You know, every
Yeah,
dentist, every banker, you know, every
yeah.
sort of professional person is a history buff. You know,
Same with Optimist or Sertoma, any service
yeah, any
organization.
service organization,
Yeah.
you'll find people who buy history books.
Okay, I definitely agree with that. And generally, those people either aren't on Facebook or they just don't engage in the weird, and they may post about their grandchild or something, but yeah, they
Yeah.
don't engage in politics. Okay, so I'm much more optimistic. Let me try to bring you down a little bit and see if you'll fight me on this.
Okay.
Our 435 congressmen and 100 senators and our cabinet members of both administrations, of Republican and Democratic, they are guiding us through history and talking about not just precedent of what the last Congress did, but great thinkers and good ideas and things that were tried a long time ago that we should get back to, or things we should be cautious of because it happened again. I mean, in all the speeches we hear on the floor, and if you go to a town hall meeting with them, they are deep thinkers reading history books, correct?
They will pretend to, but I only know of I only know of one who actually does.
Is that Valadeo?
Yeah, you know, Valadeo is one of the few people, and he happens to be a congressman.
Congressman, I'm sorry. We should be.
Yeah,
This is not. Yeah.
you know, he happens to be congressman, and he actually, you know, reached out and said, "I give me some books to read. Because I do nothing but fly back and forth between DC
Sure,
and
sure.
and he reads, and he reads deeply, and he reads carefully, and he thinks about the long term, and thinks about history.
And you're probably closest with Congressman Valadeo versus other congressmen, right?
I don't want to
Do-
pretend like we're,
right, right. But
you know,
but is there a closer congressperson you're with?
I used to be pretty close with Devin Nunes, actually,
Yeah,
but he's
yeah.
not a congressman anymore. He's the CEO
Right,
of Truth Social, but
right.
he was probably the person who I spoke with the most for
Okay.
years.
So
And
so it's
McCarthy to a lesser extent. I really didn't have a ton of dealings with.
but you're not a social science, political scientist, or a reporter talking to hundreds of congressmen on
Well,
you're on
I
a,
mean, and
or
my
even
dad
sports.
knows Jim. So our other congressman here is Democrat Jim Costa, and my dad's known him for 30 years because
Okay.
he has a boat on the same dock up at the
Huh.
lake.
How
Um,
fun.
so, and I wouldn't say they're not buddies or anything, but they say
Right.
hi, you know, that
Right.
kind of stuff. So I kind of grew
Well,
up knowing
so
he.
what's your instinct? You gave a good example. Thanks for shouting out Congressman Valadeo again. But what's your guess, educated guess on whether most Congress people are reading? And I don't mean just congressmen. I mean the political class, the campaign managers. I mean, are they trying to really think through how to solve societal issues
No,
and
no,
using
no, no, no,
history as a basis for that?
no, absolutely not. I
Okay.
mean, and I would even say, even me, you know, with everything you know about me, when you're actually doing the job,
Uh huh.
you're reacting to that day, and the hardest thing to do is stick your head up and take a few deep breaths and say, what are we doing here? You know, because you get so caught up in the day-to-day fighting and the day, whatever the struggle is, whatever the problem is that popped up that day, that you never really, or you, I would say it's very rare that you take time to actually think about your governing principles. um, it really becomes, and I mean this in the pejorative, it really becomes political science. You know, it really becomes
Right.
just what's the metric, what's the problem, what's the answer, you know, and very, and that's not necessarily bad. It's people doing the everyday work
What they
of
do.
government. Yeah. Um,
So that's a nice transition to why I thought of continuing this conversation on today, because I'm hoping to mine out of each other, mostly me mining you rather than you getting little gems from me. But I'm hoping to tease out things that a citizen can use in their daily life in order to be a better advocate, or to be a better, even not an advocate, just a better listener, a better friend, a better, better empathy, better thought process, and how they can take what little gems they're learning, whether it's a really sophisticated Facebook post or a speech they've heard, or a book they've read, how to take old time info and to put it in their real life and incorporate it more, especially when all the trends are heading against us in the 180 characters and the quicks. Heck, we don't even do 180 characters. More kids don't want to do that. They just want to have a cute picture of a dog or a dancer or something. And so how do we fight that part of our human brain that is happy to look at something pretty, a flower or a dancer, versus, wait, there's really important things going on right now, and how do I put that into perspective? So that's what I'm hoping to tease out of you today. A reaction to that tease, or should I give you the specific
No, I mean,
example?
I guess my first reaction is that you have to be deliberate about your life. Sometimes we've talked in the past about the front of your brain versus the back of your brain. What do you do if you don't think about what you're doing? Well, the back of your brain just kind of takes over, and you're problem solving. But there's this wonderful thing about being a human being, which is that you also have a front of your brain. And with the front of your brain, you can stop and snap out of what you're doing automatically, and be a little bit deliberate about how you want to live your life. And so, I think it is important for everybody to it doesn't take that much time. Sit down at your kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper and turn off everything for 15 minutes and ask yourself, what would your life look like if you were actually living a good life? And write down like what your 4 priorities would be, or 5, and what you would find if you did that is you would say, oh, I should probably be spending deliberate time with friends and family. I should probably be, you'd probably have something about work. You'd probably have something about your faith. You would probably have something about your body and your physical health, and you would probably have something about your neighbors. And then you would say, okay, what would my day look like? Or actually, what would my week look like if I just opened up a calendar and I put into my calendar, that I will think about a matter of faith with my phone turned off, twice a week, once on Sunday and once on Wednesday nights. And I would, what does your house look like? Like, I'm going to finally clean out my garage. Every week I'm going to pick one thing, and I think that the advice I give to my kids is the same advice I give to anybody. Just like fix one thing and see if that doesn't make you feel better. Like, if you're the kind of person who just chips away on a lot of different things as you go week by week, you'll look back on your year and say, oh, what do you know? Throughout the year, I just crossed a bunch of stuff off the list, and new things came up on the list, and you won't even know why you feel better about yourself.
So I think it's an excellent suggestion. In fact, I've written an op-ed for the Denver Post. I haven't submitted it yet. Similar to that, encourage in public policy, encouraging people to, and I can't reveal what it is. I'm not supposed to talk about what I write before it's published, but
yeah.
But in general terms, write down your thoughts on this issue or that issue, and flush it out instead of reacting to other people's or the
Let me give you a
events.
concrete example, because one of the things that I found really revealing when I talk to politicians or even voters, people are really, is I ask them, what do you think taxation is for? Just something like, what is the purpose of taxation? What are we doing? And then if they say the purpose of taxation is to raise revenue, for instance, for the government, I said, is it supposed to do anything else? No. Okay. If you really believe that, what would tax policy look like in the United States? And why aren't we working towards that? And what you would find is that it doesn't even matter if you had a politician who was actually cared about, I mean, there are people who literally work on tax legislation who have never asked themselves, what's the purpose of taxation?
Mm-hmm.
Like every now and then you just gotta just stick your head up and go, what are we doing again? Why are we doing this? Like what? Because if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, how will you ever know if you won or you lost or if you're making progress? Anyway, just a
Excellent.
small example.
And that's a good example for people to think about on how to be a more effective a citizen, to take a
Yeah,
big
or just like
brush.
what you say, why do we put people in jail?
Mhm.
Don't put any
Yep.
labels on it. Just what's the purpose of putting people in jail? Or instead of get past the, I guess, immediate labels and say,
Right.
what is the purpose of having, I don't know, pick some part of the social safety net, like, and then say, oh, well, it's to help poor people. All right, well then why are we giving Social Security to rich people? Like in other words, you start by asking people what they think something is for, and then you can say, okay, well, why don't you advocate for a policy that does that thing? Why are you advocating for, just student loan forgiveness? Why do you want student loan forgiveness? Oh, because there's some people are struggling who blah blah blah. And you say, well, why don't we pass a law that does that? Why are we forgiving student loans for rich people?
Why does a nation have boundaries? Why does a nation?
Yeah.
And
What are
and then you.
borders for?
Uh-huh.
Let your opponents say what they think borders are supposed to do. You'll have way more productive conversations. And it doesn't work. It's also like works on politicians too, because politicians are often so caught up in the day to day that they never stop to think about what they're doing or why.
And they also know what would really please certain constituent groups that show up to a town hall meeting. And they're aware of their opponents who are taping them, so they're aware of their words. And so, yeah, excellent advice. Let me give you two examples, and they kind of sound disparate, and I hope I can weave these back together. I was fairly surprised, I think it was yesterday, when a U.S. Senator, who I generally admire, I voted for him, I believe, unless I voted independent that year. Mitt Romney. And Mitt Romney said something that surprised me, but then resonated with me. He said, I just never knew how many members of the Republican Party don't actually care about the Constitution. So that was a new revelation
Yeah.
for him yesterday, or maybe within the last couple of weeks or months, that he publicly talked about. Does that resonate with you? It surprised me at first, but then it resonated with me.
No, it didn't surprise me at all.
But The Princess Bride, right? That's to me is inconceivable.
Well, except that it's been clear to me for a long time that, and we really got to get the Verlin and Hiram Lewis on this show, because
I'll work on it. I promise. Don't embarrass. Send me a message. Don't talk about that publicly, Professor.
In great depth, and they've got the more up to date research on this. But you should just know that those labels that people put on themselves are completely meaningless. There is no belief system behind it.
When I say I'm a libertarian constitutional conservative and have been saying that for, I don't know, 35, 40 years, that doesn't mean anything to me and people that I've been talking to.
It probably means something to you, because in other words, when things come up against your principles, you stand with your principles. So when somebody says, oh, I don't follow the Constitution, you don't say, I think you're a bad person, but you say, all right, well, I'm not going to vote for you anymore, because,
right.
because the oath is to follow the Constitution, and
it's pretty easy.
You said you won't do the job. I mean, if somebody walked into a flip burgers at a hamburger stand and said, I will not flip the burgers, you'd say, well, this isn't the job for you, because the job description here is preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution of the United States. So
That's like the only job description, except for
yeah,
an
that's
age or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you've just said you won't do that thing. So I'm like, okay, well, you can go do something that doesn't involve preserving the Constitution.
But most people don't think through that. And how does history help guide us in this? Because it is surprising to me. It resonates what Romney said. And I go, well, gosh, we need some more history professors to be talking to people that want to run for Congress, for example, then.
Well, in many ways, it's you have to convince people in power that the emperor has no clothes, that they're chasing these ghosts instead of actually listening to voters, because and most politicians are extremely risk averse, so they will just continue doing the same thing until they lose, and because what they want to do is keep getting elected. And no matter what they say their real job is, their real job is to get reelected. And and very few of them will say, well, if I can't get reelected doing this, I'll leave. And many of them do leave. There were a lot of Republican congressmen, I shouldn't say a lot, but 6, 10, 12.
Yeah.
And senators,
well, including one of my favorite.
Yeah, but also who just retired and said, I'm out. And in a way, if you add all those people up, it's 20-30%. Like there were a lot of people who said, if this is what the job description is, I'm done with the job description. The harder thing to do is to go out and make your case and actually reach voters, because it's almost impossible to you almost have to do it person by person. You have to start over and build a new machine.
But I managed campaigns, and admittedly there were only probably 70 or 80,000 people in a district at that time. But you went house to house, knocking on their door and say, hey, the dinner smells good, and hey, what a cute dog, and anything upsetting you, and here's a couple things I'm standing for, and I'd appreciate your vote. And most of them were like a minute-long conversation like that, and some doors slammed. But the bottom line is you get to know a little bit about the person you're talking to, and you advocate a little bit, and you see if there's any buying signal that they like Republicans or Dems and conservatives or pro-choice or pro-life or whatever. You get a little bit of a hint on what they might be, and you write their name down and follow up with them. I mean, that's happened before.
Well, and there have been some suggestions that we need to expand the House of Representatives again. I'm at least a little sympathetic to this idea that maybe it needs to be 1,000 people. You
have 100,000 people instead of like 800,000, or like a couple 100,000 people.
I mean, it's very congressional districts now are so big and I don't mean big geographically, but I mean big population wise, that it's just really hard to connect with and represent your constituency.
Agreed. Once you get to Congress,
it also led to a lot of weird gerrymandering. One of the funny things is if we were to double the number of congressmen, we would have less gerrymandered districts too.
That's true.
Anyway,
let me switch gears and ask the second question, then somehow try to weave them together because they are disparate. A friend of mine, who my guess is this is more on the liberal side, I'm pretty confident guess, I can't even remember who it was, posted a common theme that said, hey, listen, let's stop spending money overseas. In this instance, it was space, but we're trying to send people to the moon and Mars when we got poor people here at home. Stop it. And I don't know if you remember this part of the conversation we had with Professor Brusino. And also tying it back to our AI experience at Gettysburg. I kind of think higher ground through my history, in this case, military history, is really important. Battle of Little Round Top, you want to be fighting down, shooting weapons down instead of running up a hill. Higher ground is really important. And now the modern higher ground is space. So it's kind of hard for me to even fathom someone living in Colorado with the Air Force Academy and NORAD and Space Command and Peterson and the secret stuff we barely talk about. We have a lot of space in Colorado. And To me, though, I didn't want to just say, hey, it's Jobs and Lockheed Martin and blah blah blah. It's actually, no, it's higher ground. We want to see what's going on around the world, because that's how we can control troops and open trade for ships. And yes, can't we do both? Can't we care for poor people and have some eyes in space and be thinking about technology? So history to me was really useful in that kind of conversation. It doesn't have to be an either or let's just not care about, or yes, we should care for people at home before we care for people abroad, or go out in space. Let's explore our own communities rather than space. Do you think most arguments are like that? I'm not looking for a pat on the back. I'm just trying to use that as an example, is how I'm going actually back a couple hundred years higher ground and translating that into some argument that fits into my philosophy, the military industrial complex, um, that I generally support. Do you think that would be helpful for most people to try to read a history book and then see how it relates to their own life and what they're trying to argue for?
I'm going to give Jake his first opportunity to go and type something now, but my mind went somewhere completely different. When you gave your example, it went to the Andrew Carnegie essay called Wealth, where right in the middle of it, he says that he has this passage where I like assigning it for students, because they I say, this is where you learn how to get rich if you'd like to become rich. Here is a rich guy explaining who gets paid and who doesn't get paid. And he said, and in the middle of this essay, he says, men who can conduct affairs upon a grand scale, essentially people who understand scale. Thank you. There it is for those of you who are looking for the link. Thank you, Jake. For people who, he says, it basically doesn't matter how much you pay this person, because they're going to make you money. And if I don't hire them, my opponent, my competitors will. And then you have to understand that for the most part, what you're trying to figure out is if you have a worker who's trying to make as much money as possible for doing the least amount of work, what you want to be doing is you want to be paying that person as little as possible. Because again, most arguments come down to not even necessarily history so much as people not understanding scale. So I would say that what would help out more than anything would be either a background in statistics or economics, or something that allows you to analyze scale, because the question your friend posed is answered most effectively by pointing out that whatever we spend on space, whatever we spend on foreign policy, that's a rounding error. It's the thing that is always going to be expensive is now Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt. And spending on the military is still in that mix. But what you're saying is, why won't we do this thing? Why won't we cancel this thing that is a relatively insignificant amount of the budget, in order to give it to the thing that is already 80% of the budget? Like you're making it go from 70% to 70.001% by canceling the space program is absurd, right? And just take that dollar, take the dollar amount from the program they want to cancel, and put it into the paychecks of every Social Security recipient, and ask yourself, will it change anybody's lives? And what you're going to find is, you could cancel you could cancel all the aid to Egypt. And you want to know what that would translate to? A few pennies for a few months. Like, it's nothing compared to the cost of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Like, it just isn't. So I would much prefer to have that conversation with somebody who will agree to the basic terms of, we're going to analyze this problem by looking at the economies of scale first, and then realize, and then ask ourselves, is the solution we're proposing, does it even come close to addressing the problem you say? And the answer is no. So any reasonable person would then just drop it and never say it again.
So I want to take the conversation the way you went, which also surprised me. Instead of using history, you use statistics and economics, maybe a little bit of social sciences, actually. Let me ask a similar one. You may have seen this post. A friend of mine posted amount of police deaths in the United States by ethnic group. I don't know if you saw me post that or not, but it was an interesting diagram. It was from like I don't think, like 1780 maybe. I mean, right from the first census probably to it was a long time ago up to now. And I did a quick math thing because it was like 1,000 a year that cops kill a U.S. citizen, I guess, which seemed small to me. So anyway, I divided that by 332 million. And I said, besides it being very infinitesimally rare to be killed by a cop in the United States, what does this data show you? And it was a nice conversation, actually, because I wasn't being snarky. I was meaning it sincerely. It seemed, boy, that seems good. Only 1,000 Americans are killed a year. I mean, that's a horrible thing. Horrible, those 1,000 folks, I guess. But
yeah,
that's your point, right?
I would say yes. But now I'm going to maybe disagree with myself here. I think it's important to recognize that what data can do and the limits of what data can do. Because one of the things that when we deal with something involving deliberate violence, and what I would say is I want to know, I don't trust any of the stats that we're looking at here because they always get goosed by advocates. So what I want to know is I want to know how many police departments engaged in deliberate or covered up. Because here's the other thing. If you have a deliberate act of violence is a force multiplier. And if it involves a cover up, it indicates a cultural problem. So you might only have one incident, but it might be implicating hundreds of officers or an entire town.
Whereas whole community.
You might have one incident on the same stat that is not deliberate, that wasn't covered up, that isn't what advocates say on the other side of the issue. So
okay, so you have completely contradicted each other. Or yourself. That's terrific. So what am I supposed to take from that now? We're trying to help people.
When it comes to, don't miss, it's okay to use statistics when you're talking about a question that involves impersonal solutions, like simply moving money around. That one's easy. It's improper to use social science the closer you get to the human experience, the closer you get to trying to solve a problem. So what I always say is that there was a real difference that people always miss between the progressives who were in the Democratic Party and the progressives who were in the Republican Party. And I try to point this out to students. The difference between the progressives who were in the Democratic Party was they thought that social science would provide them with the not just the metrics of uncovering social problems, but that social science could actually provide them with the program for reform that they should be advocating. And Republicans, progressives, said, we want to use the social science, but the goals of government are eternal, the preservation of rights. Yeah. And so what we want is the program for reform should be keeping in mind what we think government is supposed to be doing. And that's not necessarily informed by the immediate data of social science, because what people tend to do, and this is where I will never be a Democratic progressive, is what people tend to do is confuse the metric with the result. and I mean, it's destroyed higher education. I mean, it's destroyed. It's one of the things that's leading to the destruction of a lot of institutions, because people say, "Oh, well, we noticed that college graduates make more than people who didn't graduate from college." So you say, "Oh, we can solve that problem," but it started in high school, right? High school graduates make more than people who didn't graduate from high school. Well, simple. Give everybody a diploma. Problem
And a
solved.
tone.
Like, and then people who graduate from college make more. Simple. Everybody go to college. People who own houses are more stable and better for society and can build generational wealth. Oh, simple. Make it easy for everybody to buy a house, right? And you confuse a thing that is a metric of a successful life with the goal, right? Because government will always want to step in and say, well, we can fix this problem. We just give it to them. And it doesn't actually solve the problem if it wasn't, it's something that I think we've been kind of struggling to come up with a name for what we call this, but the best that I've been able to come up with is just credentialism. We have a lot of people in government and in society who believe in credentialism, who confuse the piece of paper with what the actual goal is supposed to be. You say, how do you get more of your students to pass? Well, school is one of those things that can measure. And in California, we've even done one better, which is every time we have a metric that gets in the way, we just do away with the metric. I mean, so nobody could pass when they, made everybody pass high school. The next thing was, well, nobody could pass their English or math proficiency tests to get into college, so they just got rid of the tests. So now they're putting pressure on us to pass more students, but these are students who couldn't pass an English proficiency test, and I'm trying to have them read Andrew Carnegie. If you can't read at a fifth grade level, which most Americans, I shouldn't say most, but a plurality of Americans read at a fifth grade level, like now. That's not, and doing away with the thing that measures that doesn't actually solve the problem. It's like saying, this is another good Theodore Roosevelt. I'm trying to remember. I think it was a letter either to Upton Sinclair or Lincoln Steffens, where he says, "You're like the doctor who says you don't like the doctor who tells you the truth. You want the miracle. You want the miracle pill. And you're saying that I'll just believe the quack." And I think there's a line in it that says, the same is true in politics and in medicine, that it's only the quack who says he has the solution for everything. I think he actually uses the word quack. But one look at society today, and you'd say, like, we're in the midst of a society run by quacks and people who listen to quacks.
And how do we start to unravel that back into more, I guess I want to feel conservative, but I don't mean it in that way, but in a way I kind of do. How do we put some sense back into the world in our own little ways? I know we're doing these conversations on a regular basis, but how do we not only just demonstrate what we want, but how do we get more people to realize there's a better way to live their life and get the public policy things that they want?
I've found that in almost every meeting, if there's one person in the room who is a nice person, who is respected for, being judicious and even charitable and gracious, when that person sticks up their hand and says, I think this guy's a quack, you know, or asks a simple question like, I mean, I've been in so many meetings where one person's sticking up their hand and saying, you say that our goal is this, but you're advocating that. How does this lead to that? And then the person, the paid consultant who has been sent by the state, can't answer that question. And then everybody kind of looks at themselves, and you just have to be the one person who stick up your hand. And then don't say this person's a quack. Just say, you say you're for this, and then you advocate that. How does this lead to that? And
I think that's really good advice. And encourage more of that conversation, because then a lot of other people will look at it and think through it themselves. And
yeah, because once what you'll find is there are going to be another 30% of the people in the room who will then say, yeah, I want to accomplish this goal too, but how does this help us accomplish our goal? And then the discouraging part is when the meeting ends and some administrator taps you on the shoulder and says, we have to do it. It's a mandate from the state. And we all know, and we know it's not going to do anything. And we just have to do it. Or we lose funding,
Right.
I mean, but at least you get people to acknowledge that, like, this is all just a big giant joke. Like, they're not, they will admit to you that they're not actually interested in equality, right? They're not actually interested in solving the problem. They just want to pretend. And so at that point, you can sometimes start giving that stuff the attention it deserves, which you say, okay, well, if this is a meeting of people who are pretending to solve the problem, why don't we turn in a fake answer and then just all go home? Because, or sometimes I'll put it this way. Is anybody interested in starting a committee of people who really want to solve this problem? Forget what the state will pay for. What if we were actually trying to solve this problem? What would we do? We're going to waste taxpayer money on the thing we have to do. But can we find some money somewhere in the budget to do a thing that will actually solve the problem? And then, the cynical person, you can tell how many times this has happened to me in life, but the cynical person will say, well, yeah, but then the state will think that their thing is the thing that solves the problem. Right. Oh, well, we should probably just care about our students,
Right. Right.
Forget
I think those are wonderful examples on what people can do in their own life, and to make a positive difference, actually make them feel better themselves too, not to stress about the stuff that shouldn't be stressed about. You have another meeting coming up soon. We still have a couple more minutes, but I want to interrupt us and see if Bart or Jake have any questions. And it doesn't have to be directly related to my line of questioning, Jake or Bart. You can kind of take your own tangent on what you've heard today. Jake, I know you're going back to your students here momentarily. Why don't you jump in if you have any?
Well, I just think it's interesting, Tootle, you talking about these meetings that don't really solve any problems or give viable solutions. Now that I have started a career as a public school teacher, helping shape young minds in my room, I have participated in my first school-wide DEI training, targeted at multilingual students. And in this meeting, we were shown examples of how to help immigrant students, and they showed us videos of elementary school students and how they are taught. At the end of this meeting, the number one question I had is, how does this elementary school curriculum apply to my high school curriculum? And then someone brought up, oh, what do you how should we translate documents and stuff for students, give them all the resources? And the DEI coordinator said, oh, just use Google Translate for everything. We're not going to give you any resources. Just get on Google and do it. So how many problems is that going to solve? Probably none. But did the person get paid to say it? You bet they did.
Yeah, I mean, the meeting I'm about to go to is for our master plan task force. And one of the reasons why I decided to re-engage was when they took learning out of our college mission. And I thought, I guess I have to go back on some of these committees because there has to be somebody out there who says that, I would have been there to say, you can't take learning out.
The purpose of college.
The purpose of the college. They just took learning out, and no one stuck up their hand and said, like, we're supposed to have something to do with learning, because we have these things called student learning objectives, and we're supposed to link them to the college mission. And as I was trying to link our learning objectives, I realized, oh, learning is no longer part of the mission of the college. I'm like, what? Like, that's so, yeah.
It's a weird world we're in, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess I have to join the committee. Like, I guess I have to be the person to sit through the boring meeting, you know?
Well,
And Jake, go ahead.
no, what were you saying, John?
You brought that specific instance up. Let me put words in your mouth. I assume you like diversity, right? Diversity is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm fine with diversity. I mean, the area
And
that
inclusion is nice. You probably personally want it, and you want others to be included, correct? I mean, you probably don't have a problem with inclusion either, right?
yeah, I mean, like,
How about equity? Do you have a problem with equity?
Well, I get a lot of different definitions of equity from
Yeah,
people.
it
So if
depends on
they
the
can
definition.
define it better for me, but like, I don't really differentiate between white students, black students, Hispanic students in my class. Like, if you show up to my class and you're willing to participate and pay attention, I really don't care if you're male, female, transgender, whatever. I like you.
But if somebody's struggling, you probably want to help them, probably even more than somebody who's not struggling, right? If they come to you and say, I'm struggling and I need help, I just don't get it. Don't you, isn't your instinct to help them more than somebody else who's not? I mean,
yeah. And like, I went over this with a coworker yesterday. I have a sizable portion of students in my regular government class who are failing. So I teach regular government and dual college credit government. So my normal government class, they have to be in the course to graduate from high school. And I have probably upwards of a quarter, if not a third of my students who are failing. And I have students who have 0% because they have turned in nothing. Now, this is a mixture of like Caucasian students, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians. It's not really targeted at one race. And so I talked to one of my coworkers about it yesterday. He's been teaching for like 20 some odd years. And he said, and I was asking him, like, how much should I care about students failing? And he said, if they come to you for help, do everything you can to help them. However, if they are refusing to do absolutely anything to improve their situation, let them fail.
based off experience or history. Professors, your reaction to those questions.
No,
and then
and I was thinking about, there have been several examples. I mean, there's something I did last week. So one of the things that I did many years ago is I stopped dressing up for work, and I stopped telling people I have a PhD, like, because apparently it was intimidating. So now I dress way more casually than I'm even comfortable with. I wear a t-shirt and shorts and, to class and stuff. And I never tell anybody about my, my background. And why? Because some students said it was intimidating. So I said, okay, fine, I won't do that. And I had a student last week who said, in your examples of how to give footnotes, you tell us where to find them, but you didn't actually give us an example of every type of footnote we would use for just your assignments. And I said, you know what, fine. I'll go back to my office, make one up, and I'll post it to all my classes. Like, if a student asks you for help, you just do whatever they want. Like, if it's about, here's the standard and how can I help you get there, whatever you need. But if you're asking me to lower the standard, then the answer is no. But I will do everything possible to try to get you to where you need to be. But the reality is, students, I mean, as you say, you can't really teach someone who isn't there. And
sorry to cut you both short. I want to let Bart jump in because Professor's got to head across the street for that meeting he's talking about. Bart, jump in, and then we got to leave.
Sure. I thought this was all very interesting. One of the themes that that the professor was talking about, as well as Jake, is that we're spending a lot of time in our world, particularly in education, making people feel comfortable, I guess. And one of the things that worries me about that is that we're making it all about people's feelings. It seems like. And I think that's great, but there is a place like, the professor was saying that people complained that, if you tell them you have a PhD, they're intimidated. I mean, I was intimidated in pretty much every one of my college or law school classes.
Yeah.
By the professor. I think that was their job.
Yeah. Me
and
too.
I don't know, I wanted to, after a while, there's a value in that.
Yeah, you should have tried a drill sergeant, Bart.
Oh, I know.
But it's just like life, where like you're going to encounter throughout life people who want to help you and will do anything to help you, and you're also going to encounter people who are completely indifferent, and you need to be like, you have to. So, I'd never tell that other guy how he should be, but that's just my personal.
Wrap up today's conversation, Professor, because then you got to head out the door.
Yeah,
so you can take those as long as you like.
I want to also agree with Bart in this sense, and that is that one of the other flaws of credentialism is it assumes that it can supersede reality, that somehow at the end of this process we are going to unleash people into an unreal world. Like we should be preparing people to live in this world, not in some fantasy world.
And to be successful in it. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing these. We're not just doing it idly. Professor, thank you for your time. Jake and Bart, thanks for joining us today. Have a wonderful day, you all. We'll see you next week, or no?
Yeah.
Next week?
So. I don't know. Probably.
Okay.
I haven't looked at my calendar yet. I think I'll be here next week.
Have a good day, gentlemen.
All right, see you.
Bye.